Please be seated. Well, after hearing that gospel, I'm beginning to see why Father Alex took this Sunday off. Good morning to everyone. My name is Matthew Bowers. I'm the Director of Youth Ministry and Programming for the Diocese, and part of my job entails going to different churches in our diocese and talking about youth ministry, our summer camps, our retreats, all happening at Dayspring. And in fact, later on today, I'll be back at Dayspring where we will be welcoming 73 middle schoolers for a week-long stay. So I'm grateful to be spending some peaceful time with you all, worshiping with you all this morning before having to spend the week with, once again, over 70 middle schoolers. I have a tough task today about talking about this gospel. First off, I'm the diocesan youth guy, so I have to find a spot to talk about the importance of youth in church. Secondly, it's Father's Day, so I feel like I have to throw that in there somewhere. And lastly, the gospel today is particularly odd. So youth ministry, Father's Day, demon-filled pigs running off of a cliff. Where do we begin? Let's start with my time in college. You should know I'm a proud graduate of Florida State University. I graduated with a degree in religious studies with a major focus on the Protestant movement and a minor focus on biblical Hebrew. But instead of telling you about the Salem witch trials or the damage that the English language might have done to the first few chapters of Genesis, I want to tell you about Friday nights at Florida State. I was the senior warden at the Episcopal Student University Center one of my years on campus. And it was great because we had a physical church on property right where the campus was. And we were in a great spot. We were situated between two sorority houses. We were on frat and sorority row. We were just the literal street next to the campus, just a block down from the main lunch and coffee shop. We should have been the number one option for anyone on campus considering a church and wanting a church. And like a lot of Episcopal churches, we thought we were the best thing in town. We were progressive thinking with deep roots in tradition. There were 3 different students at the center who could play the organ. That's how Episcopalian we were. But we weren't getting anyone who wasn't already Episcopalian. We had a good number of students, but they all already came from an Episcopal church and Episcopal youth groups. Very rarely did anyone walk through the doors that we didn't already know who they were and what youth group they came from. And we tried a lot of things. We had a big sign out front, and it had a lot of different things written on it. The Episcopal Church welcomes you. Free coffee inside, no questions asked. Compline on Thursdays, 7:30, come join us. But we hardly got anyone brand new to attend anything. Now, about a mile off campus, there was a non-denominational church or program called CRU, that's C-R-U, and I've yet to figure out what the C, the R, and the U stands for. Now, nothing about CRU aligned with what you think a typical college student would want out of a church. They were seen as the crazy evangelicals. But they were right across from the popular undergrad bar near campus. And every Friday night, they would fire up a couple of grills, cook a bunch of hot dogs, and give them out for free as people passed by and help students get taxi rides after they had too much to drink. Now, I'm here to tell you, CRU was very successful with their program on campus. Every Friday night, their lawn would be covered with people who had left the bar. They'd be given a hot dog, some help if they needed it. And it was wild. I mean, every Friday night this would happen. All they had to do was cook hot dogs for a bunch of drunk college kids leaving a bar, and they were packed. Now, let's be realistic about some things. Not everyone who took a hot dog converted to Christianity. In fact, the majority of people who probably took a hot dog from them never stepped foot in that church, and perhaps never stepped foot in another church, or even gave them their email. But CRU had reached a level of ministry that I think we rarely attain. You see, when we do ministry, it's usually to get people in our doors. A lot of time we do ministry to grow the numbers in our church. They were doing ministry for the sake of doing ministry. And I'm here to tell you, I think that's what the goal of Jesus' ministry was. Perhaps Jesus didn't preach and heal to get people to follow God. Maybe he did it to show them God. If you look at the previous and post section of scripture around today's gospel, you'll notice that Jesus is in Galilee and he's the best show in town. He makes Elvis concerts look like town hall meetings. He's healing people. He's preaching. He's meeting everyone he can. The entire area is abuzz, talking about this rabbi who preaches the word like no other before him. And they're all talking about the great works he does. The crowds are growing each day. And what does he do? He crosses to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. A few verses earlier, his brothers and his mother come to visit him. And a couple verses before that, he's telling some of his most famous parables. And what does he do to carry that momentum? He leaves. He gets into a boat. There's a massive storm. He calms it. You all know that story. And then he gets to the complete other side of the Sea of Galilee, to a place that doesn't greet him with a crowd. In fact, at the end of the gospel reading, we hear how the people were scared of him and they forced him away. Quite different from the other side of the sea, where Jesus could sit and tell stories with his mother, his brother, and his friends. And he does something that shocks people. Jesus heals a man with demons inside of him. He doesn't roll through with a couple of business cards and a potluck dinner on a Wednesday night. He speaks to the needs of the person in front of him. Now, what does this all have to do with the story I was talking about earlier? Please hear me when I say that if you want a bunch of new people in your congregation, the secret is not becoming the Church of St. Oscar Mayer Wiener. I'm here to tell you the hot dog idea probably won't work for you. We tried it at the Episcopal University Student Center, and it didn't work for us for a variety of reasons. Mostly I wasn't the one cooking the hot dogs. My point is that the crew group found something that worked for them that didn't fit the mold of what typical ministry looked like for them. There was an extremely likely chance that a majority of the people they encountered on those Friday nights were underage and were drunk. There's a very high chance that those people that they encountered would believe drastically different than what their doctrine was. And there was an even higher chance that those people would never step foot in that church or perhaps another church ever again. But they still served him, just like what Jesus did with that man filled with demons. And don't forget the last part of the gospel that we read. The man who Jesus healed wanted to travel with him back across the sea, and Jesus sends him away, telling him to tell others about what happened instead of bringing him back. Now that is wild. Think about it in terms of here. A family comes in. They have 3 kids, elementary school student, middle school student, high school student, enough to start a youth group. They have a great time on a service. They experience real, tangible healing and connection to God. They encounter one of you in the hallway and say they want to join this church. And you say, no, go. That's wild. We would never do that. We would want to bring them in. And yet, this is kind of what Jesus just did. Now, I love the Episcopal Church. I'm a lifelong Episcopalian. But I think we have some work to do in this department of ministry for the sake of ministry. Every church, every Episcopal church at least, has those signs that says the Episcopal Church welcomes you. But I wish we'd go out to do the welcoming instead of waiting to welcome people. Jesus is out here pulling demons from a man, and sometimes I'm too nervous to introduce myself to somebody I don't know across the aisle. Now, I'm not here to condemn you. Every church is different for different reasons. There are churches that welcome newcomers really, really well. There are churches that have flourishing youth programs and churches who are deeply connected to the arts and everything in between. I'm sure there are ministries in this place that you hold up and are very proud of, and please be proud of them. My question for you this morning is, how can you step out and look at ministry not for the sake of growing numbers in our church, but for the sake of showing God to people? This is something we've struggled with youth ministry in our diocese. For a while now, a majority of the participants in our programs had come from the same couple of churches. On top of that, there was a time where you either participated in New Beginnings, which was our middle school retreat, Happening, which is our high school retreat, or summer camp, and there was very little crossover between all of those. We were doing ministry for the people who were already in the building and already involved with our programs, not for those outside of our programs. And so we changed some things. We changed the dates of our retreats so that they weren't so close to each other, meaning that youth now had time and the ability to participate in both our middle school and high school retreats, with New Beginnings being in the fall and Happening being in December. I committed to getting our summer camp dates out to our churches earlier. I've been traveling to churches this year that don't have full-time youth leaders or even part-time youth leaders to talk about camp and our retreats. We participated in a summer camp expo a few months ago in Wesley Chapel, and we didn't meet a single Episcopalian there. And it is working. 41% of our campers this year for summer camp are brand new, which means they had no previous experience with us at all. And out of that 41%, 25% of those either aren't Episcopalian or filled out that they do not attend a church at all. Now, that isn't earth-shattering, but it's a good start. We in the Episcopal Church can no longer act like we are the best-kept secret in town. Jesus didn't do that. He hated being comfortable. So often we find him leaving places when he gets too comfortable. He goes to places that he knows will be against him. He openly and publicly engages with people who drastically disagree with him and try to catch him in a snare. So what does ministry here look like with that knowledge? Are we waiting for people to stumble in and find the best-kept secret in town? Are we doing things that don't draw the circle wider when it comes to community here? If you do an event and everyone shows up, and everyone that shows up already belongs to the church, I'm inclined to say you aren't doing ministry, you're hosting a country club. The truth is that effective ministry, both youth and adult, often brings people who don't look like you, don't sound like you, don't believe what you believe. True ministry challenges us like Jesus was challenged when he pulled demons out of a man and then he was cast out of town. True ministry is difficult. It's hard. It's a hard message to understand. Now, I don't want to leave you in the dark because there is light in this story. Yes, ministry, whether it be to adults, youth, those in church, those out of church, is always difficult. Look at the Old Testament reading in 1 Kings. It's one of my favorites. Elijah is burned out. He's been screaming at a wall, and the Israelites have broken the covenant. They aren't doing what they should. They want to kill him. They aren't listening. He is ready for all of it to end, and yet God still shows up. Everything that could have gone wrong had gone wrong, and yet God still showed up. God is there. God is here. Whether ministry is perfect, whether it's not, whether it's a massive flop or 40,000 people show up and you have a bread and fishes situation. God is there. God is here. And I'm inclined to believe that when you show God to people, people will want more of God. So may you come to know that the heart of ministry may not be growing the numbers of your individual church, but showing God to people unconditionally. May you have the heart and the space to try new things and still be excited when something doesn't work. May you be uncomfortable in your ministry, for we know through the story of Jesus that God is in those uncomfortable moments in ministry. And may you come to know that we serve a God of love and a God who is in the midst of us both in worship and in service. Amen.